Ooh, Elizabeth, that's a good one. So Elizabeth asked, how do you feel things like disco amplifying and popularizing LGBTQ plus identities way back when? I don't have data on this, so this is entirely based on my understanding. I would say that during the 60s and 70s, especially the disco era, like the mid 70s, my understanding of that time period, because it is before me, is that there was a lot of playing very fast and loose with gender. And I don't want to say like there was this entire like gender abolitionist breakout, but like people were being a little bit better about coloring outside the lines. And I think this is one of the reasons why certain things started coming out into the major public, right? The discussions about certain identities, certain ideas. I also think to some degree that media can, by its nature, sort of draw in certain people. So like the disco idea is a very interesting one, because essentially what I would argue is that like disco by its nature, you know, is a somewhat, at least traditionally speaking, like it feels like a very sort of feminine type music, and I don't think that's bad, but like listen to the Bee Gees. Like, yes, these are men, yes, they are very much men with fantastic beards. Yeah, it was for people of color and the gays, which is where all good culture comes from. Like, can we be honest? Like, that's where all that comes from. Like, all good culture in the United States, it's all culture of the appropriation or export, or however you want to make that argument, that that stuff happens. Do you think that suppressing self-discovery as a youth slows mental development? Let me come back to that one. Let me cover Elizabeth's first. But I do want to come back to that one. The Bee Gees, fuck, Elizabeth says. Yeah, right? Like, listen to that song. They don't sound like dudes. Oh, by the way, just want to say this real quick. Tova, I saw that you had done this, so I just want to play it real quick. I changed it. It's no longer a Pikachu. Now you get a gay Godzilla, because that is what we do here. Hot Sauce Club has a Godzilla. That's what we do. So, yeah, I think certain types of media, certain types of trends can affect that stuff. I'd have to see more data as to how that would work, but that's my intuition. I don't know for sure. So yeah, I'll have to look more into that. If you find anything as far as your own personal research, please feel free to send it to me. Yeah. Okay, so Nick asked, do you think that suppressing self-discovery as a youth slows mental development? Maybe. So, I guess it depends on what type of development we're talking about. So if you're talking about slows mental development as far as cognition, probably, maybe. I'm not trying to be like light and centrist. The thing is like, so like if I look at this from like a developmental lens, I tend towards a very like Ken Wilber's integral theory, even though I'm not a big fan of Ken or the integral community anymore. I did interact with that stuff way back when I was an irritating and incredibly know-it-all boy, but I like the map. And so one thing that Wilber points out is that a lot of our psychological data, which this is true, we have these different developmental systems that seem to go in about the similar kind of stages. And there are ones for cognition, ones for self-development, ones for all sorts of stuff. Maybe I'll do a presentation on this from a queer perspective. Oh, that would be super cool. I would love to hear about rave culture, because I know that there also Burning Man culture. I know that stuff also has a lot of like queer overlay. Although Burning Man, I understand over time became more corporate, so I don't know how that all works. But so on to Nick's thought is that like cognition, probably not. I would say that you can be aware of a thing and still disown the fuck out of it. So you can be a trans woman and you're still identifying as a dude. You don't think that's appropriate, right? It's either against God or your parents or whoever the fuck. And I think what can happen is that you can be aware of these identities and things like that, but if you've got a pretty stuck idea of what's appropriate or what's okay or what you're allowing yourself to feel or think, then I don't necessarily see that being a thing. Like, I'll use myself. Like, I don't give a fuck where my IQ is, but, like, I like to think I'm at least somewhat bright, and I'd like to think that at least to some degree I'm self-aware enough through years of Zen, years of therapy, years of Gestalt training to be able to notice these things about myself. And the thing is that it wasn't that I wasn't aware enough to notice these things about myself, is that every time they popped up, I buried the fuck out of them. Right? For me, one of the major ways that dysphoria was something hidden from me is dysphoria wasn't a direct discomfort with certain body parts, at least not initially. That's changed. But more so now, it was this sort of thing of, like, never feeling comfortable in my body and just sort of trying to man up to that. Like, my arms, my legs, and various other places are covered in scars. And the reason being is I just let myself run through any thicket of thorns that popped up. And as such, it was almost like I didn't care if my body was damaged or ripped or horribly treated, because in some ways I just didn't care about it. And that apathy, that sort of bodily and embodied apathy, was really because I just didn't give a fuck about having a male body. The male body was fucking bothersome. So, like, you can't see it on screen, but, like, yeah, like, I'm covered in scars, either from picking at scabs when I was younger or fucking, like, you know, cutting, right? Like, and we can get into self-harm at some point to talk more about that stuff too, but, like, this is the thing. Because I feel like when we're talking about dysphoria and that kind of stuff, like, often it's sort of like this incredibly dissident and, like, uncomfortableness with body parts. And for me, it was always like a dishonesty thing. It was a disownment thing, right? So, like, I was uncomfortable with certain parts of my body, but I didn't want to really get into them. I didn't really want to know why I was uncomfortable, despite all the work I had done personally, which did make me much more emotionally sound and engaged and more cognitively sophisticated. But I was still not paying the fuck attention about the thing that mattered. So, like, yeah, so there's sort of like a question in regards to this where, can suppressing self-discovery slow mental development? No. But if you are dealing with something like, say, neurodiversity, such as ADHD, autism, I would argue, because there is some evidence to show autism and being trans does have some sort of, there is a higher likelihood, there's a bit of a, I don't know if you say comorbidity, but I would say more like a correlation. But essentially the idea being is that I have to wonder at some level, is that if there aren't other complicating factors in the situation, is it easier just to pretend this shit doesn't matter? Or is it easier to pretend this shit doesn't exist? And for me, that was the case. Between ADHD, between borderline, and between really toxic and problematic relationships, and obviously not all of them, but there's a couple in mind that I'm thinking of, there's a way in which that stuff just kind of got suppressed and not looked at. And so I would say, like, no, if we're talking about mental development as far as cognition, what I mean by that is the ability to solve problems, solve puzzles, sort of leaps of logic, I would say no. But if we're talking about sort of like mental development and the idea of emotional development, quite possibly. If we're talking about, like, sort of self-development, also quite possibly. It would really depend on a number of things. I know for me, certain things when I identified as male, like, for example, feeling okay in my body, feeling safe in my body, feeling like I really wanted to be in my body, those things were things that weren't there before I transitioned. And I almost, because of the lack of awareness that they were ever possible, just never noticed them. I'm way more comfortable in my body now. Right? So that would be what I'd say to that, is I think it depends on what line of development we're talking about, and what other factors could complicate that sort of development. Namely, like neurodiversity, some sort of pathology, or any number of things, right? So yeah, that would be my thought. By the way, if you like the stream, and you are able to, I don't want anyone to break the bank, but if you really like the stream and you feel like this is really great for you, please feel free to click the link that was just put in the chat. You can go to streamlabs.com/transgirltherapist/tip, and you can give a tip. And when you do on stream, it will pop up with a cute gay dinosaur. I will show Tova's again, because Tova was nice enough to donate $5. Thank you so much for that, Tova. You're really wonderful. See? Look. Cute gay dinosaur. It's Godzilla. Well, so the reason I went with the Godzilla is, one, I love that GIF, and two, and whoever, by the way, if someone created that GIF and I'm using it without your permission, please let me know. I will totally pay you money for it. I just found it online. It seemed like it was free, and they had a source thing saying this person posted it. I'm assuming that person made it. I don't know. I'm bad at that, so please let me know. Email me at transgirltherapist@gmail.com. But I thought about, from last time where we were talking about sort of hot sauce club, and again, we're workshopping the name, but the idea about that is still really funny to me, and I like the idea that the donation thing is now a, right, cute Godzilla. So yeah, there's that. I know he's not a dinosaur, but not everyone knows that. You can't say prehistoric apex predator that feeds off ambient radiation. Or giant cancerous monster. By the way, if you haven't seen Shin Godzilla and you want to know what a walking, like, WMD looks like, see Shin Godzilla. Look up clips from it. It's literally like, what if Godzilla was made of walking cancer? It's really weird. I can't even express how weird it is. Jaw opens, giant fire breath, and then suddenly going into a laser and suddenly just devastating buildings for miles, and it's just... It looks like the end of the world. It's a fantastic movie. I think it won the Japanese Best Picture. Yes, The King of Monsters. Also, by the way, I know like a bunch of channels, I know Vosh and a few other channels have been like pro monkey. I'm gonna say very clearly, I'm gonna come down on Godzilla on this one. I know he's problematic. I know that's not a popular take, but I'm gonna come down on Godzilla versus Kong. Godzilla being the king of all monsters. I'm sorry, Kong. I am less a fan of Monkey. I would like to return to Monkey, but I do not want to let the monkey win.